Hello and welcome back to this lecture on Python for Data Science tutorial. In this lecture, we are going to see the Python setup, right? We shall install Python and build our very first Python program. We shall basically set up two environments. First is the IDLE, Integrated Development Learning Environment, and the second is the Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is more of an industry standard used for Python development, right? Whereas IDLE is primarily used for the learning purposes. Now here's two things you need to do. First of all, follow the steps as you watch along and try to set up in your own computers, right? Whether you are using a Windows environment, Linux environment, Mac OS environment, we are going to understand step-by-step approaches in all three. And second thing, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure to subscribe to never miss a video and stay on top of your Python for Data Science tutorial. Now, for those of you who do not want to set up Python immediately, who do not want to go for the installation right now, towards the end of the video, we are also going to discuss a technique using which you can work along this tutorial without setting up Python locally in your system. However, my personal recommendation is to set up Python locally in your system to help smooth the process. Now let us follow the steps for first installing Python ideally. Before moving on to any installation, you must first check whether you have Python pre-installed in your environment or not. If you have it pre-installed, then you need not install it again. Let us check it using, I have first opened Windows PowerShell here. This is the Windows PowerShell. If you are a Mac user or Linux user, you need to open the terminal and type python -- version, right? When I press enter, you see Python was not found, which means we do not have Python pre-installed in our environment. So what do we need to do? We need to now install Python. Let us follow the step 2. Okay, before moving on to step 2, there is one small thing. Now, if you are a Linux user, Linux works slightly different from Mac OS or Windows based environment because it is more of a command line interface. So here are the steps that you need to follow to install Python in Linux environment or any Unix based environment, right? Just follow for Debian, Ubuntu, Red Hat, CentOS. I'll also provide this document in our Telegram channel. So if you haven't subscribed to our Telegram channel, I'll put the link in the description. Next is we need to visit the link and download the installer for our Python. As I click on this link, we come to this page where I'll head over to the download section. Since I have a Windows environment, I'll go over to the Windows section. Now, the thing that we need to do here is we need to select the version of Python that we want to install, right? The most latest release is Python 3.11.2. I would recommend you to always install a version which is 3-4 versions down the line. The reason being, most of the libraries or packages that are associated with Python, the third-party libraries that we use for machine learning, data science, or other applications that we develop, do not readily adapt to the newer versions because the newer versions are not very stable. They have certain security issues, bug fixes that need to be taken care of. So what we shall do, we shall look for a few versions down the line. We shall install Python 3.9.8, right? I would advise you to do the same. Let us look for Python version 3.9.8. If you go down below, you would find Python version 3.9.8. Since I have a Windows installer which is 64-bit, I'll click on this and install, right? Now once I click on this, it will open an installer. Okay, the installer will pop up. I want to add Python to my path. I'll click on this and I want to also install IDLE, pip and other documentations along with Python. So I will select it and it will readily install Python in my environment. Now our Python installation or ideally setup is complete. We shall close this window and check in our shortcuts. We find that Python ideally is present. Let me just quickly open it up and show you how it looks. This is the Python ideally. It is an interpreter based environment wherein you could type any command and press enter to execute it, right? You could specify a variable 5 plus 5, then print t, it prints 10. Okay, this is how ideally works. Another thing that you need to check is whether your path is configured, right? For what do we do that? We need to type python hyphen version again. You see what happens. You see Python was not found. Why? Because we had the Windows PowerShell open before we installed Python. We need to restart this. So let me close this and again open up Windows PowerShell. As I open up PowerShell once again and type Python hyphen version, I see Python 3.9.8. This means our setup using ideally is complete. So follow these 4 steps. If you face any difficulties, put it down in the comments. We shall together solve it. You know, this setup is really important to help keep pace for this tutorial. So make sure to not skip it. Now, one more thing to highlight for Linux users, if Python is not pre-installed, you can use these commands in your terminal to install Python of specific version. Here it is for 3.8, you can specify 3.9.8, right? Also, in Linux based distributions, ideally comes separately from your Python installation. So for that, you need to separately install Python again in your terminal using sudo apt-get install ideally 3. You could also install ideally for Python 2, but since the support for Python 2 has been stopped by the community, I advise you to install ideally 3 and not ideally. Okay. Next, we shall look at the VS Code VS Code installation and setup. To set up VS Code in our environment and use Python using VS Code, we shall again follow the 4 steps. First of all, we shall visit the link which takes us to the Visual Studio homepage. Here you will find multiple options. See, Mac OS, Windows x64, Linux x64. Use accordingly whatever you require, right? Windows x64 installer. Now once you click on it, the installation will start. Since in order to save time, I have already installed it and I shall open it. Let me quickly head over there. Now once this is installed, you will find something like this. Click on this installer, Visual Studio Code installer, and it will automatically take you to the desired page. This is the page where you click I accept the agreement, click on next. Let this be default paths. You can change the path, but I would advise to let it be as it is for now. Okay. If you don't want to create a start menu folder, then leave it as it is. Leave the name Visual Studio Code. If you want to change it, your choice, but let this be as it is. Next, I want to create a desktop icon for Visual Studio. So I click on this. I also want to add to path and click on next and then click install. Now the installation will take place in some time. Now our setup for Visual Studio is complete. So we click on finish and it will launch Visual Studio Code. Once Visual Studio Code is open, you will find the home screen which is as this. Once our setup for Visual Studio is complete, we shall come to the home page section where you will find something as this. You can open any folder, create a new file and then start working with Python. How we will do? Let us see. I will click on a new file. Okay, they will give you multiple options. Since you have Python pre-installed, you can select a Python file. Right now, there is one thing you need to check here. Go to the terminal, click on terminal, new terminal, open this. Okay, you need not worry if you are not familiar with the environment yet, because that is not the objective of this lecture. In this lecture, we are just seeing how to set up and install and get ready for the upcoming lectures where we get started working with Python programs. Okay, so open this terminal, just follow this guide as it is in the step-by-step manner and type Python hyphen version just to check whether you have Python in this path as well. So you see Python 3.9.8 is present in my VS Code environment, so I can easily use it. Now I will just give anything, print hello, print welcome to Python for data science tutorial. Okay, I will just save it as demo dot. Let me select the extension Python. Where is it? Python. Here we have Python, so we save it. Okay, now to execute it, just type Python, give the demo file name and see. Hello, welcome to Python for data science tutorial. So we have seen the installation and setup for Python using ideally. We have seen the setup using Visual Studio Code, and for the first half of this entire Python tutorial, we shall be using Visual Studio and ideally extensively. However, for those users who do not want to set up Python immediately in their local environment, here is something for you. In the link provided here, you can open this link, go to this editor. This is an online Python compiler. Here you can write your Python programs and click run, and you would get the same results as you would get in a local environment. The only thing is, in a local environment, the things are more manageable. You could save your results, you could save the files that you're working on, and then start working from where you stop, right? So my personal recommendation is to set it up locally. However, due to any constraints, if you're not able to do so, use this compiler without any issues, without any problems. So hope you enjoyed this lecture. See you in the next. Have a nice day. Bye bye. Jai Hind.